Today for my lunch I'm going to make Welsh Rarebit. It's kind of like cheese on toast, but a little bit more elaborate. None of my ingredients today are going to be Welsh. This is Welsh Rarebit, which is traditionally a Welsh dish, but my ingredients come from all over the place. Anyway, let's get started. I'm starting with 35 grams of butter, which I'm just going to melt over a very gentle heat in this pan. Now the butter is melted, we're just going to turn the heat up a little bit and put in 35 grams of flour. And so we're making a roux here, which is a flour and fat mixture, which we will just fry a little bit. We'll just get that sizzling to cook the flour. So we're just going to gently fry that for a minute or so. So if we were making a bechamel, we would be adding spiced milk at this point. If we were making velouté, we'd be adding stock, but I'm going to add beer. I think this will take about 100 to 150 ml of beer to make it into a sauce that's sufficiently thickened. So that's had enough time frying now. So I'm going to start with, that must be about 100 ml of beer, and it will foam up. I'm just going to give that a whisk to make sure there's no bit stuck on the pan. And we can turn the heat up a bit now. I just want to make that thicken. So this is Old Speckled Hen, it's a pale ale. You really could use any beer you like here, but you probably don't want one that's too hoppy. It needs to be a relatively sweet malty beer rather than a really hoppy one, unless you really want that flavour in your sauce. The heat will tend to accentuate the bitterness of the hops, so you don't want anything that's too hot. And I'm just going to keep on adding beer. That's good. Tiny little bit more. Okay, that's probably good. So that was about 150 ml of beer, perhaps 175, and that's got me the nice thick sauce texture I want. While this is still warm, I'm going to put in a teaspoonful of whole grain mustard, and we'll just whisk that in, and a good splash of Worcestershire sauce, probably about 2 teaspoons full of Worcestershire sauce. Now I'm going to let that cool to room temperature. The rest of the beer I'm going to bring it down to cellar temperature so that I can enjoy it with my Welsh Rarebit. Next, and this is not a traditional ingredient, I'm going to just chop up a red chilli just to spice it up a little bit. Kind of standard red chilli, not too hot, but also not completely benign. And so that goes into my sauce. And I've also got a bunch of chives here from the garden, but I'm not going to chop those up, I'll just snip them in with scissors once we're assembling everything. I've got this lovely cheese. This is called Twanger. It's mature cheddar, and it's from Glastonbury. And so I'm going to grate, I've got 300 grams here, I'm going to grate about a third of that, probably 100 grams of cheddar. So it's quite important to use a nice, well-flavoured cheddar for this. And of course it can be done with other cheeses, so if you can't get hold of a strong cheddar, you could use a bit of pecorino or something like that. You could use an aged Gruyere or anything that's got a little bit of a kick to it. So there's about 100 grams grated cheese there. 3/4 of that I'm going to put into my mixture. And reserve back about 1/4. So there we go, so that's about 75 grams of cheese has gone in there. And then I'm going to snip this bunch of chives in as well. Now, in case you're wondering what is Welsh Rarebit and why is it called Welsh Rarebit and so on, I'm going to link a very useful website for this on the video description, so you can learn all about this. I'm not actually using their recipe, I'm just kind of making this up as I go along. But there are lots and lots of variations of this. Okay, and we'll just stir in those chives. That's looking really good. The observant amongst you will notice I haven't added any salt or seasoning yet. The cheese is actually quite salty, as is Worcestershire sauce. So one more ingredient to go in, which is 1 egg. And then I'm just going to beat all of those ingredients together so we've got a very well mixed sauce. Now that's the reason for leaving this beer sauce to go cool, was because we have to add that egg in. Looks good. So just got a nice loaf of white bread here, and I'm going to cut myself a couple of really nice thick doorstep slices out of here. So I want to kind of maximise the size of the slice as well, so let's just have a think about how we're going to cut this. Yeah, I think like that. Now, a lot of recipes will tell you to toast the bread first, and that's good if you're going to put it under a grill. I'm actually going to cook this in the oven, so I'm not going to toast the bread at all. It will get toasted during the cooking process. What I am going to do, however, is put a little smear of Marmite on this bread, just because partly because I've got so many jars of Marmite in the cupboard now from those videos I did about them. But also, this serves in place of some salt and seasoning. So just really a light smear, and not going to try to uniformly coat the bread, just going to put some little blobs of it on there in the middle. Good enough. Oven-proof tray. And then this rarebit mix is going to go onto the bread, kind of share it out between these slices. Bit more on that one. Going to try and heap it up a little bit in the middle. It will spread a bit as it cooks, but the egg will help it to set. So hopefully it won't just all run off the edges of the bread. Nice. Now that last 25 grams of cheese that we reserved, just going to go on top. That looks pretty nice already, but it needs to be cooked. So that's going to go into the oven at 180°C for probably 10 to 15 minutes, but we're going to have to keep a really close eye on it. Okay, and there it is, hot and bubbling from the oven. And you can see, despite that having quite a lot of cheese in it, it's set on top of the bread, so it hasn't dripped over the sides, and that's because of the egg and also because that sauce continued to thicken when it was heated. And if we just, the underside of the bread, if we just take a look at that, has just been lightly toasted, so it's nice and crisp but not burnt. Now you could toast this under a grill, so you could toast the bread on one side, put this on, and then toast the other side under a grill. I find that makes the edges of the bread tend to catch, but I find the oven is a good way of getting this cooked all the way through, nice and evenly and gently. It's still going to be way too hot to eat at the moment, but I'm just going to move it out onto here. And we can do chef's privilege here, which is to taste these little bits that have dripped off the edge. So it's had a few minutes cooling. Let's get it plated up. So just inside, it's still gooey and saucy in there. Bottom of the bread, just nice and crisp, but not burnt. And the topping is just gooey and delicious and savoury. And I think just to give it a little bit more interest, I'm just going to scatter a few capers over the top, optional, obviously, and a tiny little bit of extra salt, because when I tasted the bits that had dripped on the pan, it was a little bit under-seasoned. So there it is. Let's get that to the table and give it a taste. And the remainder of my speckled hen here has just been cooling down and is now at cellar temperature. So, cheers. So that's my take on Welsh Rarebit. Let's give it a taste. Really, really tasty. Surprisingly cheesy. I think something about the beer and the cheese have done some weird alchemy. Tastes really nice and cheesy, but light and almost like a souffle on top. And that probably shouldn't be a massive surprise because the ingredients for this are not far off those of a cheese souffle. It's really cheesy, it's savoury, the chives, the chilies, the beer, it all adds together to make an amazing sort of combination of flavours. Really happy with that. Can't think of a way to improve on it, but maybe you can. So do let me know in the comments what you think of this, and maybe you can think of a way to enhance or improve it. That's Welsh Rarebit, or at least my variation of it. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.